I'm Luke Story. For the past 22 years, I've been relentlessly committed to my deepest passion, designing the ultimate lifestyle based on the most powerful principles of spirituality, health, psychology, and personal development. The Lifestylist Podcast is a show dedicated to sharing my discoveries and the experts behind them with you. Robbie, how was your neurovisor session? For those listening, our guest Robbie just came in the home studio here, and I said, hey, you want to take a little journey? He'd already done the Lucia light, which was my first plan, so I didn't get to de-virginize him on that, but put him under the neurovisor headset with his head inside a giant Leela block, for those of you that are familiar with that particular brand. So how'd that go?
I come to your house a little bit nervous. It's only the second interview I've done in person. So there's a huge setup, there's cameras, there's lights. Notice my heart's beating a little bit faster. And you offer me this, beautiful gift. And so you kind of get in this contraption, put the device on my head, and within 3 to 4 minutes, listening to that nice music, I started feeling like some moments of pure joy. And so I went from, what am I going to say? Is it going to be good? What's Luke going to think of me? These feelings of doubt, just to being completely present, looking at some of these beautiful colors and having moments of real awe. I would call them awe, I guess. So a few moments of, I'm not thinking, I'm not worried, I'm just here enjoying the sounds and the light. And I've tried Lucia Light a number of times, and I really preferred. That was a really beautiful experience to set the tone, help me feel a little bit more, adequate and present.
That's awesome. Well, we had toyed with the idea of doing an Othership breathwork before, which I've been doing a lot of. We'll obviously talk about that. But I thought I might get too spaced out if we did that. It's like maybe do one after, but I've been pretty consistent with it. I think yesterday I did one of the ones because I emailed you and said, which one's the most psychedelic? I want to just like take your app to the depths, and I did the third eye one. Yeah, and it was pretty profound. So I've been in a good habit of that. But it's the first time I've ever, offered a guest a little 11-minute journey. So I'm glad that you had a good experience and that you weren't like, I can't talk now. All right. Well, that brings me to my first question, sir. Let's start by just saying, what is Othership? So you guys have this app, and you have a location in Toronto. And spoiler alert, sounds like you have some other locations popping off. But give us just the elevator pitch on that, because I'm going to meander into a bunch of different stuff here. But I want to make sure that people understand that we're going to be talking about breath work, and specifically how you're creating an incredible business around that, and hot and cold therapy and all this. So just give us a kind of summary of what Othership is in its current incarnation.
Yeah, I think the main problem we're solving is the fact that our nervous systems are broken, especially coming out of COVID more so than ever. The feelings of, I'm stressed, I'm overwhelmed, I'm burnt out, I'm lonely. If I asked you, when's the last time you were bored or had nothing to do, or how did you feel today? All of those are super hard to answer. We're always, wake up, check my phone, have 10 different items on my to-do list, go, go, go. It just feels like there's no space. And as a result, it's because we're in our sympathetic nervous system, right? That fight or flight mode all the time. And evolutionarily, we're not meant to be that way. It's just a confounding number of variables in our environments that have changed. And so that was the problem with solving, was my nervous system was broken. And so similar past to you, struggled with addiction, had a company that blew up, was broke, depressed, and struggling, and had these issues. And so found through a ton of study, practices of breath, hot, cold, psychedelic medicines, all these different things that help you to reclaim and master your nervous system. So that's what Othership is. It's the idea that you can use these ancient practices in community in a way that's fun, so that you can learn to take back control of your nervous system.
Excellent overview. When you said your business blew up for a second as it fell out of your mouth, I was like, oh, he made bank. It went well.
No, like blew up.
There's two ways a business can blow up. It can implode or explode. I guess if it explodes, maybe exponentially it grows. That's great, man. What's the latest news? Like, what are you most excited about? You were telling me before about some new locations happening. What else is like in the immediate future lighting you up about your venture?
For 4 years, I've been working on this with four of my best friends, my wife, and three best friends, another couple. And we've known that there's power in these experiences. Watching 50 people in a massive sauna, turning out the lights, doing a massive anger release where everyone screams. We did a class on Monday night called Loving Kindness, and it was based on a metta meditation, where during the class you actually eye gaze with a stranger. Then the lights go out, you bring to mind an enemy or someone you're struggling with, and you send them love. And I just saw probably 60% of the people crying. And 4 years ago, we saw this stuff happening, but nobody really believed it. I just feel like you got an ice bath in a backyard, man. Like, what are you, what are you talking about?
Nobody's cried in my backyard ice bath
And
that I'm aware of.
yeah, so but I saw like people doing breath, coming together in community in small groups and in a backyard around a fire. And I thought, well, this is really powerful. And so for the first time now, you put some money behind it, a beautiful space, design, aesthetic, incredible music, like world trained facilitators, and the experience changes. And for the first time, we're starting to get recognition where people are saying, "Oh, I've heard of Othership," or "I did a class, I had a transformation," or 50 people are crying in a group on a Monday night. You see that happening, and it just feels, wow, there's actually something here that's much more powerful than we thought. And so when we were building this, the question was like, is anyone even going to come? Like we had a small community, but is the average, person who maybe isn't into their emotions and psychedelics and all this other stuff, the average banker, lawyer, engineer, or just standard person, especially in Toronto, it's not a super spiritual place the same way that maybe the West Coast is. And so we're just wondering, like, are people going to come to this thing? And, we've been open for a year now and 2 weeks wait list to come to the classes. Everything's full. And the biggest thing I'm excited about is taking, we built in Toronto, which is a pretty world-class city, and coming to New York. So we've been looking for 7 months. We found 2 spaces, and it feels like we're going into the big leagues, like biggest city in North America, taking a big swing, signing leases, putting, our whole livelihoods on the line to kind of make it happen on a bigger stage. And I don't think I've ever been in my entire career more excited than to bring these things that changed my life to a huge group. So you're catching me now on like maybe one of the best days of my career.
So good, so good. And I can only imagine the big leap of signing a couple leases in New York City. I mean, I used to do events with another business, and we would have to sign just, renting a boutique hotel or a fashion studio for 2 to 5 days. And it was like, what, how much money? You know what I mean? That was very temporary, but you're like, man, we better put some asses in seats or we're going to be out on our ass. So that's a huge move. In your journey so far, and we're gonna get into that. I think you and I have so many parallels in terms of how we arrived at what we do for a living and where our passions lie. Who are 3 teachers or teachings in general that have influenced your life or work that come to mind? Like 3 books or people that you've encountered that have just changed your trajectory?
That's a really interesting question. I think one, and I like the first thing that came to mind is who are people in my life versus like famous people that I read about and tried to implement. And so one is a former co-founder of mine. I worked in crypto. I worked for the Ethereum the ecosystem and then the Ethereum Foundation for 4 years. And I met co-founder Sina Habibian, younger guy, brilliant, had done physics, and he just whenever it was time to do something, he was just like, let's fucking go, man. Like, let's do it. Yeah, of course we're going to do it. So we pitched to Andreessen Horowitz, which is like one of the biggest tech investors in the world. And I was super nervous. I think he was maybe 24, 25 at the time. And I was like, hey, he just joined the team. I was like, you want to lead the pitch? And he was like, yeah, of course I want to lead the pitch. Like, where most people would be like, whoa, I don't know. Like, I've never done this before. And he just jumped in, led the pitch, crushed it. And I saw that, and it always stuck with me of like, okay, you can just do it. Like, why? Don't be afraid. And it kind of goes to New York, where the idea is, yeah, we're going to sign leases. Like, let's go. Who, if it's not us, like, who's going to do this thing? Like, we've made it. It doesn't exist. Let's go. And he's someone I always think about that inspires me of like, you can do it. Like, believe in yourself, bet on yourself, and just go for it, even if you're nervous.
I like that. Someone, just interjection here. There's a really great principle that someone taught me many years ago when I was kind of in the freeze moment of having an idea and being afraid to execute it. And I was trying to get all prepared and get all my ducks in a row and plan it all out. Then I was going to do it. And my friend at the time, this guy Hector, who was like a kind of real estate investor guy, he said, "Luke, you're going about it all wrong. You're trying to do the ready, aim, fire method. Nothing gets done like that. It goes like this: fire, aim, ready."
Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, I think I know what you mean. It's terrifying. And I did it. And I just like started doing my thing. I was doing these classes and just put out ads and started enrolling people with no class. And then that made me get the goddamn class together. So I like that. Who's the second one?
So it's funny. This question is the first thing I'm thinking is like, oh, try to sound smart. What's like a book you read? Like
I love
who?
your authenticity, by the way, that you share openly some of the internal dialogue that many people don't say out loud. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. But that was my thought was like, try to sound smart. What's a book you've read? And then I was like, no, like, okay, I read a few books a year, whatever it is. Most of the time I hang out with people. So obviously the learning is going to come from people in my life. So the next one that popped up was my wife. And so before my wife, I was struggling with addiction. I'd lost my company. It was broke. I met her and I always had this need, this insecurity of, I want people to like me. I want to have nice things. I want to prove I'm successful. When I met her, it was the first time. And I didn't feel like a good person. Like when I was struggling with addiction, I had problems with relationships and money and just doing things that were shady generally. I would disappear on the weekends.
I relate.
And we can get more into that too. But when I met her for the first time, I just felt like I was starting over. And if I just treated this person amazing, like it would mean I was a good person. And so every day, like I've never raised my voice or said like a negative word to hurt her feelings. And that was really important to me to start. And the more I did that, the more it made me feel worthy. And so she taught me about what it means to love somebody and to be a real team. Because before that, all relationships were somewhat selfish, where it's like, what can I get from this?
Or transactional in some way.
Yeah, and even like I had lots of friends, always was like very social, but it never felt like, hey, this person would like die for me. I'd never felt that. And so with her was and not only that this person would die for me because I'd had another relationship like that, but I would also die for them. And I was going to put everything on the line for them. And so she taught me to feel, because of that, it was the first person I could be totally authentic with and share my secrets. Like, hey, I don't feel good about these things and I'm struggling with this, and like totally open book with no lies. And I'd never had a relationship like that. So over now, I think it's 5.5 years. We just had a baby 3 months ago.
Congratulations. Wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah. So that's been a crazy journey, but she has totally changed my life. And through her, that's, around the start of the sobriety journey, we started this business together. My entire life has changed. So she's taught me the most about just being open and honest and serving and like loving.
Awesome. I relate. So fortunate to have that experience, especially when you've had the converse experience before, right? I mean, in my case, through no one's fault but my own, right? In most cases, at least. Yeah, that's beautiful. How about a third?
So the third one is before this role, I'd always wanted to make money. Like that was my driving force out of school. So I was an investment banker. I worked in finance. It's just like, how do I make money the fastest? And when that didn't work out, I was like, I'm going to do a startup. That's how I make money the fastest. And it was always like operations, discipline, hard work. I never grew up in a house where creativity was prioritized. It was like work hard, make money. And so I always thought of myself as like an operator, somebody who gets shit done and is disciplined. And it was only in this last role where I've actually had a creative side. So like, designing some of these breathworks and scripts and classes and what is the brand and the storytelling around it. And our two leads in that space, Harry and Amanda, two of my best friends now, we met on this project and they're responsible for creating all the guide training, all the classes in the space, all the production that you hear on the app. They're like creative wizards. Like I'll wake up one day and Harry will have made a theme song for Othership that he sent me. And it's like, hey man, I made this last night. It's like, what? Like, always having these amazing ideas. And so watching him and Amanda, his wife, for me, it's opened up something that, wow, you don't have to be this operator. Like you are creative and everyone's creative. Because I never like played any musical instruments. I wasn't in any plays. I just never felt like I was a creative person. And so what I've learned over the last 4 years from watching him is that, yeah, I can be creative and there's creativity in everything, even if it's just writing a script or telling a story. And when you are creative and feel that energy of like making something, that's been some of the biggest joy I've had in my entire career. So the two of them for helping me embrace creativity and like understand that I have it has been extremely powerful.
That's beautiful. Yeah, it's interesting, on the creativity, because I've always thought of myself as someone creative. When I was a kid, I drew, I played music, I make content, but I've been recently in a similar way kind of expanding my interpretation of creativity and thinking about other people's expression of that gift. And what comes to mind as you say how you're exploring your creativity and seeing that it's multifaceted, or at least looks different than someone traditionally who's creating as an artist, let's say. Think about someone who's really good at Excel spreadsheets, which is to me like I would rather have my toenails ripped off than even open an Excel spreadsheet, let alone try to read it. Worst case scenario being creating one. But that person who's maybe very left brain and analytical and good at math and things, that's creative to them, right? So I think you're so right. That's a really good point. Everyone is creative. We're constantly creating. It's just a matter of what it looks like. That's very cool. Before we get into more of the hot and cold therapy and breath work and things you're up to with Othership, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about your experience in the darkness retreat. I only know of this through my friend Aubrey, who I haven't seen it yet, but I think did a short documentary about his experience. But the way he explained it to me was that it was, this is a person that's done a lot of work with psychedelics and whatnot, said that it was as, if not more powerful than any experience in which he's taken something exogenously to explore consciousness. So how long ago did you do that? What were the nuts and bolts of it? Where was it? And give me some of the highlights of that reel, if you will.
Yeah, so that's once a year I try to do some type of transformational work. And so 1 week, 10 days away with no phone. It could be a psychedelic retreat, it could be a Vipassana or meditation style retreat, it could be something like the Hoffman process, it could
Did you
be
do that?
the Hoffman I'm doing this June. So
Oh,
that's this
cool.
year's
Are you doing the one in up in Napa?
Calgary
Oh,
in
wow, they have
Canada.
one up there? Oh,
Yeah, I think
cool.
there's a number.
Oh, cool. Yeah, I did that a couple years ago, or a few years ago now, and did a podcast with one of the facilitators.
Yes, I'd heard somebody messaged me over the break and was like, "Oh, this changed my life." One of our friends, Ben Nempton from the Buried Life, and he was
Cool.
like, "It's changed my life. You got to go. Like, really, like, you've got to go." And I was like, "You know what? Fuck, I'm just gonna book it now and make it work." Because all these things, it's like, oh, I got to take a whole week off. It's not
Right.
really a vacation. So I try to do
Definitely not.
yeah, so I try to do that with no coffee, no caffeine, and just do a reset.
Yeah.
And so 1 year was the dark retreat, and before people were kind of talking about it in our community, so we get a lot of people in Othership. We're really interested in this kind of stuff, and like, oh, have you heard about it? Have you heard? I'm like, what? I'm like, what is this thing? It sounds insane. And then the more I looked into it, I was like, whoa, this is actually a super advanced meditation practice. So in some Eastern cultures, it represents the time from death to rebirth. So going through the bardos, it's called. And so there'll be a 47-day dark retreat that people do through adolescence to adulthood to master dying and the process before rebirth. And it's very intense, right? Like you're sitting, I couldn't even, after 8 days, couldn't even imagine that. So I'd heard about it. I did a Google search. I found this place called Sky Cave Retreats. To my knowledge, I think the only place in the US. It's just outside of Ashland, Oregon.
Of course it is.
Amazing guy who runs it. I talked to him on the phone, and he'd done 6 months on retreat, and a year in the wilderness. And so I was just talking to this guy, like, okay, he looks like he's figured something out. His energy, he just feels like somebody that I want to embody, or that would be a good teacher. And so that really encouraged me. So I booked, went out there, and it's in the woods. Like you're out in the middle of the woods. They have this amazing commune. They have a massive garden on it where they grow all the food for the people that are staying there. And it was kind of a whole different lifestyle. Just being part of that and seeing how kids could be raised outside of the city was really cool. And so you go in, and there's not much training. It's just you're in, and you kind of look around a little bit, shut the door, lights go out, and you realize I can't even see my hand in front of my face. Darkness.
Like a float tank.
And then, and then and they're like, okay, well, it doesn't adapt. And also, I didn't memorize the room. So if you even move 15 degrees, like a wrong turn, you're lost in this tiny room. And so I'd have to be on my hands and knees, like feeling around.
Oh,
And so
man. Hopefully, there's no sharp objects in there.
it's a cave, you know. There was just a bathtub, and I thought when I thought like this is so strange. Why is there just this bathtub and in the middle? And that was like the saving grace of the experience because it was a little bit cold, and with the cold, the fear comes. So the first 2 days, I was kind of afraid of the dark as a child. So if in my basement, it would turn the lights off, it'd be dark. I'd run up the stairs, like super afraid. I was afraid of horror movies, and a lot of those fears were triggered. So as a human being, light and sight is where we get safety. So you wake up, first thing you do, you open your eyes, look around. I'm safe. I'm in this room. I'm alone. And so in the darkness, the first 2 days, you generally just sleep. There's no light, and so you have this long, like super dream filled rest period. And I hardly left the bed. And if I was going to go to the bathroom, I'd feel a little bit nervous. No one's going to grab you, but you kind of feel like maybe somebody is. And so there's just this subconscious, deep seated fear from lacking sight, which was really interesting because you have to teach yourself to breathe in that state. And so the first 2 days were sleeping, and then it was mastering fear and discomfort. And so I had asked him at night, how do I do this? I'm struggling. So he would come once every night to drop off your food in like a little, they'd put it on one side and then you would open the other one in the dark, pull the food in. So
Like a
no
double
light.
door?
Exactly.
Oh, okay.
Exactly. And so, and then eating, it all comes in Tupperware containers. You don't know what anything is. You're kind of eating in the dark, sitting
Eating
up,
with your hands?
eating with your hands. They would have like a plastic cutlery around for things, but a lot of stuff was like sandwiches and chips and stuff that's easy, like apple, that's easy to eat.
Was the taste of food different with all of your senses being deprived?
It wasn't super different. It was like uncomfortable to just, you realize how much we rely on sight as our dominant and primary sense, like everything.
Is there a toilet in this thing?
There's a toilet.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a toilet with
I was
same
picturing
though,
like a bucket. For a
you
minute.
obviously have to sit down, you have to find it. So there was running water and there was a
Okay.
bath. And so after,
And you could take a hot bath?
you could take a hot bath.
Okay.
And so that was, dealing with the fear. You're kind of cold. It's this cave. It's dark. You'd wake up, and every time you'd wake up, there's a panic. It's a sense of like, where am I? And you can't see anything. It just felt like you're being compressed. Like just, and I also went in, I think I was overworked, 16-hour days, coffee. Like I missed the flight because I was on Twitter at the gate. Like just, it was like you're driving a race car, like right
Speaking
into
my language, bro.
the wall.
I've
like,
missed many a flight in my day.
and so, this was like it was going maximum stimulation to minimum. And I would have these dreams that I'd left. And then I was like, no, I couldn't do it. And they were so vivid. And then I would wake up. And so in the space, I think some of the learnings I took away were just this one technique when you're feeling discomfort and fear, like deep fear. It was a way to breathe. And he had taught me, I said, I'm struggling. And so he had taught me this technique of, okay, breathe, feel into your body, feel into your body, feel into your body. Let go, let go, let go. And then visualize a positive feeling, a time you felt positive before. Perhaps it was a time you were brave or stood up to a bully, something like that. And sit with that feeling until you shifted your state. And what's nice is in day to day, you just feel shitty. You just go on. Like you're, okay, I'm busy. I've got my next email. I've got my thing. In the dark retreat, there's nothing else to do. So you kind of like getting into the ice bath, like you have to relax, or else you're just going to be afraid the whole time. So it was a really nice way in a contained environment to deal with fear. I think people might be disappointed that had done psychedelic medicines and are going and like, wow, it's going to be this psychedelic trip. It's more of just an intense as can be meditation, long, grueling. There's no like spectacular fireworks and heart opening love. It's just, I'm here dealing with only my thoughts alone. And so in some ways it's a form of torture, but some ways it was super beautiful. So I would go, be cold. Day 3, I'm starting to get the hang of it, taking these warm baths, and in the warm baths, expanding. So that was like the big, the bath. Like,
party,
I've got the bath
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
And you try to make that last an hour and a half. And then around day 3, 4, some interesting openings started to happen. And
And this is 8 days?
it was 8 days. You can kind of stay in as long as you want. I'd actually thought I got COVID about day 3. This is in like the big pandemic. It's scary. You don't know. It's before the vaccines. And I started coughing. And so it's just like, I'd heard some horror stories on the way there. And it's like, I got the new strain. I'm going to die in here. They only come check on you once a day. And if you don't say anything, they might assume you're sleeping and I'm going to die in this cave. And so I was like, you should leave. Like, you're coughing so heavily, you should leave. And I was just like, fuck, I put on my email, that I was going to go for this 8 days. Like, and I only make it 3. Like, I'm going to have to go back to the team and be embarrassed. It was this like ego, like self-consciousness of like, don't be a quitter. Like, you can't quit. And then I realized I was allergic to something in the cave, like some type of dust. And every time I was sitting on this meditation cushion they had, it would blow the dust in my face. And so I was coughing so violently. But I just stuck it out. I was like, you know what? There's no way you're going to quit. And so I stuck it out. I realized that. I stopped sitting on the cushion. And so it got better after that. But that was pretty hardcore fear of like, what if you died here alone?
And also just facing that, that self-imposed determination of failure, right? I mean, I'm the same way when I commit to something. Like, I feel bad if I give up,
Yeah, there's also insecurity too. Like, what are other people going to think? Like, who cares, really? But then, I'd put it out there that I was going to do it. And so it was an interesting just test of will. And so you can go, you could do 2, if you just wanted to rest, it would be such a nice weekend rest to just go in there and sleep for 2 days.
I think that would be a good starter for me.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, I do great in float tanks, which some people find to be really uncomfortable. Just the claustrophobia, the acute loneliness of just being somewhere where there's no stimulation. But I like it a lot, and I go longer than the normal time allotted usually. But when I heard about this darkness retreat, I was like, oh, hell no. Which for me makes me want to lean into something when I have a fear. It's like, well, what are you afraid of? And I'm like, I don't want to look at the thing I'm afraid of, But 8 days, dude, that's a long time.
It was long. Like, the two things. So that was the first learning, was just dealing with fear and finding comfort in darkness. And as I was afraid of the dark as a child, there were these memories that came up of, this movie Witches, this movie It. They're like these villains that terrified me in nightmares when I was 5 years old. And I could see visuals of these villains, but it was kind of like they were retired. I'm like, oh, remember when we used to scare you as a kid? Like, you're not afraid anymore. And so it was really a mastering of fear in a very long setting. So that was a really interesting,
like exposure therapy.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
So that was really interesting. And everyone I told about this, like, what are you talking about? This is insane. Like, nobody was like, fuck yeah, I can't wait to do it. It's out there thing. And then the second thing that was really interesting was, in life, we're on the surface almost all the time, especially in a standard life. It's, and even with some of these practices, I'm doing this every day. I wake up, what's my task list? I'm checking my phone every hour. I've got these emails to send. I'm on social. I'm sending, like, it's just always stuff. And so you're only thinking about like what you need to do to survive. And maybe you have your 5-minute meditation practice. Maybe you have a moment that's like awe-inspiring or lovely. But even in a relationship, like, you get in these ruts and it's the same thinking patterns over and over and over. And so what this does, imagine you put up an umbrella and that same stuff that's raining down on you every day, all its stimulation is gone. And so all of a sudden, this like clarity comes of, okay, I'm not thinking about what I have to do tomorrow because I don't have anything to do. I'm just here. And so stuff starts to come up. Am I living a good life? Oh, wow, my parents are almost 70. Like, mortality is, they might die soon. How am I going to feel about that? I'm halfway through my life, potentially. What kind of changes should I make? Wow, this is so boring. What is missing? Connection. What does that feel like? How great is life? So just having...
Cool. That's cool.
It's almost like, you read all these books to get insights, and it's just like, okay, if you just stop, the insights are there, and you're just taking away everything that's distracting you from them. So instead of having to listen and get others' insights, it's just a way to like go as deep as you can into who you are, mixed with like, wow, this sucks and it's really long. And, around day 5, you can't really sleep anymore. Before day 5, the dreams get incredibly vivid. Almost, that part is almost psychedelic. And then the one other thing that is memorable still after, it's probably a year and a half, almost 2 years ago, was coming out.
Oh, man.
Like, probably one of the best moments or most memorable. I can still feel it in my body. It's about 8 days. I'm like, hey, you know what? The goal was to do 10 initially. And I was like, you know what? 8 is fine. There's no more ego here.
How could you tell that it was 8? Did you ask them when they came in or
So
something?
he comes once a day to deliver the food.
So you knew he came 8
exactly.
times.
And you're like, no, you're like, there's nothing else to think about. Like, it's, you're like, okay, I made it. Like, if I could just do one more hour.
Scratching lines on the wall. One.
It's hardcore. And so I was like, okay, you know what? I've made it. this is good enough. I don't have anything else to prove. The ego of 10 days, it's stupid. Like, you got what you needed. And I'm like, I'm going to get out. As soon as I said I'm going to get out of my mind, it was like a panic. So, like, running, like trying to find the door, like, fuck, where is it? I can't get it open. I can't get it open. Like, and you can leave anytime. Like, there's no person. It's not like locked or anything. You can turn on the light anytime. And so I just, finally like pull the door open, and it was in the morning, still dark, and like buzzing. That's how I would say it. So I open my eyes, open the door. It's dark, but it was like I could see every molecule, like in the air, particles just buzzing. And wow, what is happening? And also the air in the cave wasn't super fresh. And so all of a sudden I'm in this like mountain outdoor area with it felt like I was drinking cold water, like by breathing, just like the most refreshing cold water. And so I went, laid on the ground, just breathing in for probably 20 minutes. And then slowly the sun started to come up. And at first you realize that color is only a reflection of light. And with no light, there's nothing. And so, at first it was browns, dark, as like the sun started to come up, and like a bit of greens. I'm kind of hugging the ground, just looking. And then when the sun sort of crested and I saw that first blue in the sky, and the sun like hit me in the eye, it transported me to a moment when I don't know why this moment, but a moment with my dad skiing as a kid, where I saw the sun like fully in that moment of just pure joy being a child. So it's just like, wow. And I like look down the hill, and this dog comes running up, like massive sheepdog. And I just kind of hug the dog. It's the first kind of person I've interacted with. And I ended up going for a walk, putting on some music. They had a creek there. So I did like a natural cold plunge, ate a beautiful sauna. And then I ate what I could see. And so in that like 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 hour stretch, just like the beauty, absolute beauty of the simplest things of just seeing the sun, walking, breathing in fresh air, being with the dog in a cold plunge, talking to people, like, 20 out of 10 life experience for the simplest, easiest things. So that was sort of the third major learning, was just a reset on gratitude for life, like how good
Yeah.
the small things are.
Wow. So cool. The way it was described to me included, I don't know if this is scientifically accurate, but when you're in darkness for that long, you're going to produce more melatonin. And if there's no light, you won't make any cortisol. And then this melatonin has the capacity to sort of downgrade or upgrade, I guess, in this case, to endogenous DMT, which we know we have in our brains, well, probably in our whole bodies. But you didn't have any kind of far out visions other than your dreams. Like you never felt like a psychedelic or transcendent experience to the degree that one would with taking plant medicines or something of that nature.
I thought there was transcendent experience in thought patterns. So there was like heart openings in that same way, but they're sort of earned. Like if you take a 5-MeO, like you're on the journey, it's going. You don't have control. You're just letting go. In this case, you're still cognizant the whole time. So there was no explosion. It was like a slow, gentle build with state shift from lack of stimulation. And there are visuals. So you're looking in the dark and things are happening. Like there was moments where I felt like I was in a courtyard with dark, like almost in Harry Potter, like Voldemort's lair, like pretty scary shit, with these shadows that are coming toward, and you can't really make it stop because you can't, you close your eyes, it's the same thing. And so there are scary visuals, but it's not like an ayahuasca or DMT experience where it's like,
Got it.
I'm on this journey. So it was much more subtle, challenging. It's just kind of a different thing. I wouldn't say it's better or worse. I would put like dark retreat here, psychedelic medicine experience here, deep meditation retreat here, and they're all kind of different ways of getting to a similar place.
I like it. Yeah. The house of God has many windows. All right. So tell me the name of the place again.
It was called Sky Cave Retreat.
Sky Cave Retreat. All right, you guys, we're going to put that in the show notes, which will be lukestory.com/ can't say S's very well, / Robbie. lukestory.com / Robbie. We'll put that in there along with anything else we talked about today. Okay, so let's talk about something we have in common, and that is our battles with addiction. What did that look like for you? What was your poison? Where did it take you? Give me the gnarlies.
I love stimulants. Always have. My brain, I did some of the genetics testing. My brain clears dopamine super fast. And so like if I watch a Netflix show, I can watch, 20 hours. If I'm reading a fantasy book, I can read the whole book in one sitting. If I'm working, I can go 2 days, and I can get really ramped up. So if you're like, "Hey, man, let's compete at this thing," boom, dopamine triggers, like, let's fucking go, And so for partying, I started with alcohol, in high school, pretty early, probably like 14, loved cannabis, alcohol, graduated to ecstasy, then graduated to cocaine. And that was probably about 18, 19. And alcohol and cocaine became, for me, almost every single weekend throughout university.
Were you
And
doing
then
the cocaine in your nose or in a pipe?
in nose.
Oh, okay. Did you ever hit the pipe?
Never hit the pipe.
Smart man.
Yeah, it wasn't
Very,
around.
very intelligent choice.
Wasn't around my group of friends, so
Yeah.
wasn't exposed to heroin or like crack.
Probably because you didn't live in Vancouver.
Yeah, Vancouver's a pretty gnarly
That's what they say.
spot
I haven't
for
been there
this
in a
kind
long
of
time,
stuff.
but I understand heroin is ubiquitous there.
Yeah, so I just loved socializing, and I felt pretty insecure. And so for me, going out, first thing would be like, in Toronto, is power drinking. So, I'd easily have 6, 7, 8, 10 drinks. A gram of cocaine, 2 grams of cocaine, and I'd be out until 6, 7 a.m., something like
Damn,
that.
son.
And then that graduated, and that was kind of okay. It would happen just on the weekends, and it was my early 20s. I got to be about like 27, 28, and it was really starting to impact my relationships, my work. So I started to be like, getting home 5 a.m., 6 a.m. with a group of friends to, okay, now I'm by myself and it's 11 a.m. and it's the next day. And then I'm drinking again and it's, 48 hours of
Oh God.
partying. And then,
Oh, that gives me chills. There's there's a lot of bad feelings in life, but one of the most creepy feelings that I experienced an untold number of times is when you're like coming down off drugs and the sun's coming up and the rest of the world is up like getting ready for work and stuff. Because I don't want to steal your story, but one quick story that was like at the lowest of lows in my addiction was when I was using a lot of crack, which is why I asked if you hit the pipe, which I would definitely not recommend to anyone ever do even once. It's the worst fucking thing ever. I'd be smoking crack all night and then I would want to keep going. And so I'd go out like I'd still be going at 8 or 9 in the morning. I would walk around Hollywood Boulevard, like looking for dealers. Most of them would leave when the sun came up. And talk about like the most demoralizing, shameful, depressing, sad thing in the world is watching other air quotes normal people like waking up and starting their day and you're the fucking loser. And no judgment against people that are still doing that. If you're listening, I hope you make it through. But those were, I think, the darkest times for me. It was not even those times like alone with myself coming down, but coming down and trying to not come down while the world is like spinning around you, especially in a big city, and just being out with the bright sun, just going like, oh my God, dude, you are a fucking loser. Your life is over. And with the contrast, I guess the contrast of being around other people and the way that they probably see you as you are a yellow, skinny, strung out kid on the streets of Hollywood. I mean, just the worst. If I've ever thought about, maybe I could have a glass of wine, like I just go back there and I'm like, even if I could, I don't want to find out the hard way. So I stay on the path. But anyway, more about you. So this started to progress where it's not like partying with the homies. You're waking up the next morning and you're supposed to show up somewhere and be responsible to someone or something, and you're falling apart, I assume.
yeah, so like a couple of things that like came to mind. I moved into this really nice hotel in Toronto, and so I'm trying to run a startup, and it's no longer Friday and Saturday night. That's happening, and I'm missing work on Monday. Then it's like, I'm going out for a glass of wine on Wednesday. And it's, maybe just a little bump. Okay, a little bump and to go to sleep. That's in my mind. I'm just going to take a little bit of Coke and go to sleep. And then, and then it would be once a week. I would be
I love the
showing,
logic there.
like, one drink's fine, little bump, it'll be super fun. And then, I'd be driving into work without sleeping, machine gunning cigarettes, like red-eyed. Even, you take 2 showers, you still smell like alcohol and drugs. And I would drive into work and then go into work and I was like, what am I, then I would sleep in my car midday when I came down, like in the back seat, and I'd bring a pillow. And a couple moments, I was living in this super fancy hotel and I would be up all night and the bar would open at 11 a.m. And so I would, be waiting 11 a.m. and I would go down to
That's
the bar.
a long wait.
with a with
The
a
liquor stores in Hollywood would open at 6 a.m., and that was a long wait. 11 a.m., I couldn't make it.
and so I would have, baseball cap on. I'd go down and just order 4 shots and a bottle of wine to take up to my room, and I can only imagine what the person is, like, thinking, like, "This guy's red eyes. He just, on his own, like, Thursday morning, drinks 4 shots and, goes up to his room." And so that period was probably 2, 3 years of like, "Whoa, this doesn't feel good. This isn't normal. This isn't just like," because in university, it was kinda normal, and, there'd be a big group, everyone would go out for brunch the next day. It wasn't didn't feel like a problem. Even in my early 20s, it didn't feel like a problem, and then around 26, 27, this stuff started happening as a kid. This is like, you're walking around in the daytime looking at people like, "This is a fucking problem." Like, and then I tried Cocaine Anonymous, tried Alcohol Anonymous, didn't really work for me. I tried a Vipassana retreat, which, like, worked a little bit, and it was the final straw was an ayahuasca ceremony. Not the first time, but the second time I went to Peru, and I really went with the intention of, like, I don't wanna do cocaine ever again. And through that ceremony, I realized, like, okay, well, the problem is alcohol. You're having 2 drinks, and then it's loosening your willpower. You're putting yourself in these situations all the time. Like, why? And so that's when it finally stopped. So, but I tried to quit for 3, 4 years. Would have like 2 months sobriety, and then step back and feel like guilty, and then would have these binges. And then about 30, 31, moved to Israel, did the Vipassana. A few months later, did the ayahuasca, and then have been sober ever since.
Wow, good for you, man. I find that this path, when I got sober, your only options were going to a treatment center followed by a lot of 12-step meetings, which I took to like a fish to water, and it worked for me great for until now, 25 years later. Um, but a few years ago, I started to meet people, and this is what actually led me into having the curiosity to explore plant medicines and whatnot in an intentional way, obviously. But I started meeting people like you that were like, "Oh, I was on coke, I was drinking, blah blah blah," and I couldn't stop myself, and I went and participated in a ceremony, and I got sober. And I remember when I first started meeting, it was on the podcast. I started meeting people that had that experience, and I'm like, this makes no sense because the paradigm of sobriety I come from, which is the most well tested and well worn, at least in our recent history, there were probably sober people in tribal nations and things that used plant medicines before. But as far as like Western culture, 1935, Alcoholics Anonymous pops out of nowhere and has affected millions and millions of people's lives positively. But part of that model is total abstinence because like you explained, that was my experience too. I'd be like, well, I just got to lay off the coke or the heroin or whatever, but I can still drink, and then this inevitably would always end up at the same destination, no matter what the initial, substance was. So when I started meeting people that the way I interpreted it in the beginning was like, wait, you did drugs and it made you get off drugs. How does this make sense? But over the years, of course, I've learned and I think just grown more curious about that phenomenon. And I think what it is that what Alcoholics Anonymous does, I mean, it does a lot, but at the core of it, really, the purpose, the stated purpose of that program, for example, is to elicit a spiritual experience. And the funny thing about this is, and I've done some podcasts kind of touching on this, the foundation of Alcoholics Anonymous, and let's just call that like all of the 12 steps and all of its permutations and all the different problems people have, right? There's an anonymous for just about any personality disorder or addiction. But it was founded upon the co-founders Bill Wilson's famous white light experience, which he experienced kind of in the DTs in a treatment center in a hospital. A couple days after, he had been weaned off of alcohol with a plant medicine called belladonna. It was this formula they used to use to dry drunks out. And so he had this psychedelic experience. A couple days later, had a spiritual experience on the natch and got sober from that. And then, the rest is history. And then he sought out to help people have a spiritual experience. So from that perspective, it actually makes sense that if someone has a deeply transcendent experience using, air quotes again, a drug, right? 5-MeO, ayahuasca, psilocybin, LSD, whatever it is, it makes sense that one could have the experience of the divine, of God, of higher states of consciousness that could then render them sober. and you're not the first person I met that's had this experience. The interesting thing to me about it is that just having a peak or a series of peak experiences, it could remove kind of that demon from your personality, like that glaring flaw of addiction, but it doesn't necessarily give you a framework of principles by which to live that change your moral compass and your inherent character. So there's no question in this. I'm just kind of sharing my perspective with you. Um, it seems that one not only needs a deeply transformative experience, but following that, and I guess this is what we call integration in the realm of working with medicines and stuff, is that one kind of needs some sort of philosophy or framework by which to live so that you can, or practices, which we're about to talk about. It's a good segue, actually, as I ramble. But it's really important stuff. That's why I like to share this, because I have had a lot of experience in these realms at this point. You have to have some sort of, well, you don't have to do anything, but I think it's the longevity of one's sobriety and quality of life is not only dependent on that peak experience, but in the unfolding of some sort of spiritual framework or practices that keep you going, right? Whether or not you choose to go have one of those experiences again. So I'm going to bake a question in there. So you got sober on this ayahuasca retreat in Peru. How did things like breath work and hot and cold therapy that have now merged into this thing that's I'm seeing is going global for you? That's my vision for you with Othership. How did you start using those as integration tools to keep that going? And what other kind of teachings or tools have you used? You mentioned Vipassana retreats so that you have something of your own to build on, right? Because one can get sober. There's an old saying in AA, what do you get when you sober up a horse thief? You got a sober horse thief, right? And when I first got sober, dude, I used to steal from my job. Like I was a scoundrel, but I was sober. So I didn't have the kind of the morals and the compass to guide me yet. And thankfully, I hopefully have learned that by now. Definitely not stealing from anyone. So what was your experience of that afterward? How did you start to integrate some of these other practices so that you weren't like, oh, bing, my head got blown off by ayahuasca, and now I'm just back to being me again?
I mean, this is like such a good point in the conversation because you hear so much of, oh, and even the way I was telling the story, it wasn't the ayahuasca that got me sober. It was the ayahuasca that gave me a period of time to make habit change. And so when you come back from that first experience, like I feel amazing. I can do anything. My willpower is stronger. Every time I do one of these transformational experiences, especially with psychedelics, I feel there's a window to make change in behavior, but it's not sufficient to guarantee you'll make that change.
Right.
And so there's Gabor Mate has a movie, The Jungle Prescription, and they send heroin addicts to do ayahuasca.
Oh, I haven't seen that.
Yeah, the remission rate, spoiler alert, is or whatever. I don't know if it's remission's the right word, but the people who are doing drugs, relapse rate 99%.
What?
And massive. And so,
God, I can't believe that.
Well, the problem is if you go back, and I've actually seen this with friends as well, who are like, "Hey, man, you quit drugs. Like, what'd you do?" Like, "Oh, this retreat, I want to go." And like that's kind of it's hard going through the ayahuasca. It's brutal, but it's still easy. Like it's 7 days, 10 days. You do some journaling, you do a diet, you go. What's hard is you come home and same friends, same job, same thought patterns. You don't change your thought patterns you've been building for, if you're 40, for 30, since you're 3, 4, 5 years old. So you can't just, like I have the same things I'm working on for 10 years. It's the same intentions, the same deep down inner critic. So I think you come home and the chances that you are changed, as you said, they're not. You're just sober. And so for people who are listening, I think the plant medicines help give you a chance to change, but then the change comes at home. So what worked for me, what was super lucky, is that I met this partner, and she was super into health and wellness. And so it was, hey,
then you're like, well, I better get on this, or
Yeah,
she's going to be gone.
And she supported me. So one thing, like I'm not different. Like I still have problems with dopamine and excessive stimulation. So I drink
Like
coffee.
refreshing apps.
Yeah, so that I try not to do, but I love coffee. I love work. So now my addiction is work. It's slightly more healthy, but it's, still not great. I love ice baths. Like anything that's going to make me feel alive, I'll do. And so it's taking, like, look, you can't just become abstinent at your house having no fun sitting there. So that was the impetus for Othership was like, can we make something at night? Like, I don't want to go to AA. I don't want to sit in a church basement. It works for some people. It made me feel not good. And I also didn't want to go to therapy. I'd go one to one and I do Zoom and it's valuable, but it's not like Friday night. Let's do a therapy session. And I didn't want to be in restaurants. I didn't want to be in bars. Didn't want to be in nightclubs because that would lead to like, oh yeah, I can have a drink. And so my wife and I, she was like, oh, why don't we go try this ice bath? I've heard about it on these wellness podcasts. Let's go do it. So we found a Russian spot like 30 minutes out of town in a little strip mall. We went to this bathhouse and our first date was a sauna and, cold plunge.
Great plan. Great first date.
I just felt, fuck, this is
Because
amazing.
if one of you didn't like it, you could have compatibility issues.
So we did that, and like usually you're on a date, you're like, oh, do I look cool? Like, what am I going to say? Do I have any jokes to tell? Like, you're kind of nervous, and it was just the ice bath. You're both feeling, you're pinging. No one's on their phone. You're kind of in a bathing suit and a robe. You're not all dressed up, and it just was amazing. And so we started doing that every single weekend for years. While I worked at Ethereum, we lived in San Francisco, we lived in Berlin. We'd always grab a crew on a Friday night and be like, hey, well, let's all go to the bathhouse together. We'd make WhatsApp groups, be at a conference, like, let's all go to the bathhouse. And every time, like the next day, you'd wake up and, it kind of gives you that stimulation that you're getting from drugs, but in a healthy way. Like, it's actually raising your sustained dopamine levels. So if you struggled with cocaine and stimulants, the ice bath can help repattern. And so you hear a lot about it for like inflammation and immune system and all these things. And it's great. It's definitely a biohacking tool. But for me, it was a repatterning for drug addicts. And I've actually seen like legitimately 100% of people that like cocaine use love the ice bath. And it's just, nature's cocaine in some ways. So you're feeling this massive boost in dopamine, but it's healthy. And so that as a tool daily, extremely powerful. That combined with breathwork, the ability to shift my state. Like, I needed to do things that were fun for me. So having a supportive partner that was like down to adventure and keep me honest, but still like leaning into my personality. And some of these things that an addict has are superpowers. So I can outwork anybody,
That's very true.
Right. And so it's just leaning into what is my personality. And like, I'm not changing it, but putting guardrails in place with friends and family. And then if I need stimulation, yeah, I'll do an ice bath. I'll maybe do a deep breath work. And so those tools were like the bazooka for people who are struggling to maybe meditate or, therapy is not working. These are things that change your state instantly, that reset your neurochemistry, that make you feel better. So that for me was the goal was like, okay, meditation sort of worked, psychedelic sort of worked, but they're not really working for my friends. Like, meditation's really hard. It requires a ton of discipline. You sit down, your mind's racing. It's like, am I doing this right? You can do it for 30 days and still feel, I don't know if I've got it. So most people fall off. And then therapy, there's massive lines. It's quite expensive. You have to bare your soul to people. So there's a lot of friction for both of those. Whereas like, you jump in an ice bath, you do some breath work, you listen to some music, you make both of those fun and community driven. There's almost no friction to get started. So those tools for me, when I started doing them, they really took away the urge to take drugs. And I knew if I wanted to take drugs, I would do that instead. And eventually the urge to do drugs, I just stopped thinking about it.
Wow, so cool. Yeah, I'm envious of youngsters like you that were able to have access to those experiences early on. I suffered for quite a few years when I first got sober because, I was actually going to Russian banyas and Korean spas and doing hot and cold and stuff like that, and all kinds of different, before it was called biohacking, doing biohacking stuff, the infrared saunas and all the things. Colonics were big back in the day, in the 90s. But I think now, like, God, if I would have, someone turned me on to microdosing, breath work, daily hot and cold, and being able to do those things with like-minded people, I would have had, I think, much less suffering. But it is what it is. The suffering, of course, probably has a lot to do with why I sit down and talk to people like you and share these conversations. So I want to alleviate for other people. But I just want to tell you, you're lucky you came into the sober game at the time you did, especially since, sitting in church basements and AA meetings didn't resonate with you for whatever reason. I might add too that not all meetings are created equal.
Absolutely. And I think this is a fantastic program. It's helped millions of people. It just, for me, the few that I went to, I just felt,
dude,
like there's something wrong with me.
Everything has its level of consciousness, right? Including each collective consciousness of every little micro 12-step group out in the world. And I don't go to meetings personally myself at this point in my life. but I did for a long time. And I mean, if you walked into one that was like low consciousness, it could definitely be less than helpful, right? And there are others you walk in and you're just like, oh my God, the love in this room is transformative. And you see, street people starting to come into the meeting, and a couple of weeks go by, and now the guy's showered and is sober, and his mental illness is improving. I mean, it's incredible, but it doesn't necessarily appeal to all people. So I'm excited that there are other ways that you're describing now, kind of in your path. There are a lot of other alternatives for people that are suffering and need a different flavor. And I think you can combining all of those things, or whatever combination suits your personality type, you can make it much further, much faster in terms of just regaining your true self and developing spiritual practices that help you not only feel better but become a productive member of society and do things like you're doing with Othership. There's just the land is rich now with opportunities for people, especially people with addictions. So thank you for sharing that. What's happening in your Toronto location, which I'm really disappointed. It sounds very far, and thanks for the invite in February. I have other plans, but it sounds hella far for me. Living in the middle of Texas, you realize like everything's super far. It's kind of like living on an island. It's sort of weird, but on your site, there's a few photos where you can see like these giant 50-person saunas. It looks super vibey. It does not look like an old school Russian banya or Korean spa in a mini mall in the suburbs. It looks super high level. So, what's the space like? What are the experiences like? And who builds your freaking saunas? They look really cool.
Yeah, so Harry and Amanda, who I had mentioned, had trained in Europe to be like off-goose sauna masters.
Oh,
so
really?
it's a term I think originated in maybe Germany/Finland, and it's an art, kind of a performative art. So it's the use of essential oils and different smells, different temperatures, dancing, waving the towel to create performance. And so our classes are partly inspired by the traditional off-goose, which they live and trained. Harry and Amanda, myself, Miles, we've been to over probably 100 bathhouses worldwide. And they were so detail oriented. They would go in the saunas, measure them, look exactly
Oh,
what they
that's
want,
cool.
ask about what kind of wood. They trained with one of the world champions and lived at his house for a bit of time. So they actually custom built the sauna, the dimensions,
Wow.
the heater. So it's an internal expertise. And then we have an amazing designer who created like the vibe. And so the space itself is meant to feel like a social space, but also we call it the house of transformation. And so there's 3 types of classes. And so it's, to my knowledge, the first ever classes, emotional wellness classes in a sauna and ice bath at that scale. So you'll come in, there's a guide, there's a fire, everyone sits around the fire in stadium seating, and the classes have.
Is this inside the sauna or like in the tea
This
room?
is out in the tea room.
Oh,
so you'll kind of meet
there's
in
an actual fire?
Yeah,
Oh, perfect.
you'll meet in the tea room, and the idea is like humans have gathered around a fire since the beginning of
Totally.
time, and we wanted to create a place where you can, there's hot and cold, but socializing is important. So you'll come in. The classes might be one of 3 things. So there's up classes, and that's like almost like a fitness class. So you'll have vocalizations and roars, movement, maybe some squats, really getting the energy up. The music might be electronic or hip hop. It's very much like if you've been to Berries or Soul Cycle, it's that kind of vibe. It's really ramping up your energy. And there's down classes.
Kind of like the app. You have up, down, and then
and all around.
And all around. Yeah, that's the third one. Yeah.
So the down classes are meditative. So think candlelight, sound baths, introspection, asking questions about your emotions, some gentle stretching, very relaxing.
That's
but,
more my steez.
yeah, like a little more exciting than
Yeah.
a traditional meditation class, right?
Yeah,
So you've got
yeah.
the hot, cold to help you break down those barriers. And then the signature classes are the all around. And these are really
Okay.
meant to be therapy light classes. And so your anger release, your shame release, we have one called the Rose Thorn Bud. And so the rose is your best moment of your year with rose essential oil on the stove. Then it's your thorn, what you're struggling with. Lights go out in the sauna, someone's playing a gong. You bring to mind that moment, you scream it out. 50 people just, ah. Then it moves into your bud. So it's your intention for the year. So you're slowly teaching people these emotional regulation qualities, because in a sauna, there's no phones. You're actually captive. Whereas in a workout class, you're working out. So you have someone for 15, 20 minutes to teach them a skill or take them through a journey. So each class has towel waving, performance, different scents, and then some emotional regulation. There's a couples class where you come in, You'll do 3 minutes of massage. Your partner will massage you for 3 minutes. You'll do some eye gazing. You'll go in the tub together. You'll come out. You'll hug each other to warm up. So it's a mixture of classes every day, drop in. So, it's midday. You just want to, you're in town. We want to go for coffee. We go for a quick hot cold instead. And then at night, there's socials. Because the big thing was like, do people want wellness parties? And our backgrounds are in hospitality. My partner owned a bunch of restaurants, nightclubs. He's also on a sobriety journey as well. And so it's like, oh, could we create, the Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday night vibe? And so that was a question and something that now is just, it's slammed. And so, you want to meet
Wow.
a girl, you want to go on a date, you want to have a birthday, you want to bring a bachelorette, you want to go with friends, but in a way that it's not people wasted falling all over. So we had a party on New Year's, complimentary. We just told everyone in the community, hey, if you want to come, it's free tonight. We're going to be sharing lockers. Don't bring any valuables. And we programmed a 10-minute breath work, started at 11:50, ended at midnight on a hold, 10, 9, 8, with a giant roar of
Oh, that's great.
excitement,
That's
with
great.
100 people in the space, all doing the breath work and then like high-fiving, giving hugs. And so it's
Wow.
like, that's a moment that's usually spent in a nightclub, wasted, that now you're still doing it socially, but actually setting a real intention for the new year. So the space is really a combo of emotional wellness work and making it like cool. It doesn't have to be I'm going to my therapist because I'm depressed. It can be twice a week I work on loving kindness at Othership. I go and I think of people I love and I do it in the hot and cold. And it's my
Wow.
emotional wellness practice. And then at night, if you need that stimulation, you don't want to drink, you want to go out, you want to party, but in a way that's healthy, it's that too.
Wow. I can I give you some unsolicited business advice?
Yeah, let's go.
I say you cancel the leases in New York and get one here in Austin. I would be on that shit on the regular. I'm kidding about canceling. Obviously, you couldn't and wouldn't, but are there any plans by chance of exploring here?
Surprisingly, that's why I'm also here.
No way, dude.
Yes, I'm looking at 2 spaces.
We
So
need you, bro.
2025, end of 2024 would be the goal, but we'll see. So and again, very, very early, but
Yeah.
exploring 2 spaces.
Well, I can tell you, there is a massive, you might probably already figured that out, a massive community of like minded people here. I think many of whom, like me, have moved from New York or LA and wanted a little mellower life and a bit more freedom or whatever called us here. But man, I mean, you could throw a rock and hit someone that's into breath work and hot and cold. I mean, it's just like, I don't ever meet anyone here that doesn't have that as a lifestyle practice. So please do. Humble request. In the meantime, I'll use the app in my own ice bath and sauna. Invite a couple homies over. But that's just, man, I think you're onto something so cool there. You're going to put a lot of therapists, God bless them, out of business because so much can happen in community and state change and intentions and all the things that you're describing. With your model in Toronto, you have what do you say, like a tea room or something?
Yeah.
Have you guys played around with like serving kava or anything like that in there?
So we haven't now. This is kind of like it was the smallest possible space. It's probably the smallest bathhouse in the world. Like it's only 3,000 square feet, but still 50-person sauna, 4 ice baths, tea room. And the goal was like, hey, do people want this? Like, does the average Joe or Jane want to come in and work on their emotions? And we were like, okay, we think it's amazing, but are we crazy? And the result after 1 year is like, yeah, people 100% want
Yeah,
this.
you got a wait list? Like,
Yeah, so the new spaces are 100-person sauna, 8 ice baths, quite a bit bigger tea room. So in this space, we had no room for, like, we just have on tap sparkling water, teas, all that stuff's complimentary. And then it was very much very low frills in terms of amenities. So something like having a kava night would be amazing.
have you ever tried this drink called Feel Free?
I have. Yeah, the
Yeah.
kratom and kava
Yeah,
combination.
I always issue, a caution there. I don't ever drink a whole one. I think it says on the bottle, drink a
Yeah.
quarter, which is about what I drink. But if you drink a whole one of those, like you're lit. I mean, it's pretty strong, but it makes some people nauseous, I think, because of the kratom and whatnot. But I hit them. I keep a case of it around, and I like to do a little quarter. Oftentimes, I forgot today, but I'll do it before a podcast. But I find that particular drink is a really great social lubricant. And if you just use like a quarter dose, you can make like a mocktail that's tasty with some juice or sparkling water or whatever, and it tastes really good. And it's the best as a former, avid fan of alcohol. I would say in 25 years, it's by far the best alcohol substitute that I've found that is relatively free of side effects if you go easy on it.
If any of your listeners want an opportunity here when we open these 2 spaces in New York, this isn't really our expertise. We'd rather partner. So if people have good ideas they want to send us for
Cool.
non-alcoholic beverages, send away and we'd be
Cool.
happy to partner.
Yeah, it'd be neat to have like a tonic bar and just have different options or even, things that are stimulating too for people that want to
Yeah,
buzz
some
that
type of
way,
nootropics
Yeah,
potentially,
yeah.
stuff that's legal. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, super cool. Let's talk about the app. So I got the app. You guys sent me a link, and thank you for that. By the way, the other day I emailed you, and I was using it wrong. I didn't think I was logged in, but I just wasn't hitting the right buttons. And you're like, "Give Luke lifetime access." So thank you for that. That was a
Absolutely.
really an amazing gift. One of the many benefits of having a podcast. But, in anticipation for our conversation today, I was like, "Well, I need to do a bunch of these so I really can speak from experience." And dude, I gotta say it's freaking badass. I mean, I love breath work. It's something that I've been doing for a long time, but it's also something that I'm not gonna go full on unless I'm in a group session with a sound bath and the whole thing, right? Like, if I come up here in the loft and do some breath work, I'm gonna do like 5 minutes or something, right? And just get a little buzz and activate or calm down whatever I'm going for. I'll do some, Kundalini yoga, Kriya or something like that, which is kind of how I first got into, call it breath work, but there's a lot of advanced breathing stuff within that tradition that can be pretty profound. But I just won't do it. It's like working out, man. If I go work out with some buddies or God forbid go to a gym, like, yeah, I'll put in an hour. If I work out on my own, I'm gonna go get my X3 bar in the backyard for like 5 minutes and be like, yeah, good job, Luke. I'm out. It's just it's not called I think I said this in one of y'all's promos that they don't call it breath work for nothing. Like the ramp up period, and you guys say this a lot in the guided sessions on the app. You're like, okay, you guys, I know this is hard right now, but like we're almost to the threshold. And it's so true in breath work where you start doing it, it is like working out, depending on the style. But it's oh man, it's like, oh God, I don't want to do this. I don't want to do this. There's resistance, but then you do hit this threshold and you just gain momentum, kind of like running, right? I'm not a big jogger, but you run, it sucks at first, and then you hit your stride and you're like, I could do this forever. It's really like that. But a couple of things I like about the app is that there is such a variety of duration. Sometimes I don't want to do an hour, like I want to do 10 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever. But if I want to do an hour and go deep, which I've done, I think the third eye one was about an hour, um, then it's there. And an hour sounds like a long time. But once I get in there and get activated, next thing you know, they're like, okay, last song. So I like that. And also, the music is really good, and there's a lot of variety in the music. And I think know Amanda and Harry, right? They're some of the
Yeah,
leaders, right?
yeah.
Guides. Yeah, so like your voice, I know prior to meeting you, their voices. I like that there's a couple different guides in many of them. So like you'll be doing it and then Amanda takes over and there's all these different little sections and I find that there's enough novelty in it that it kind of keeps my interest. And I did 2 nights ago one of the 10-minute sleep ones. And I'll be honest, I was a little skeptical. I'm like, nothing makes me tired. Like I literally just have so much energy. It's very hard for me to go to bed. Once I go to bed, usually sleep well, but like getting there, it's hard to get myself in bed and relax. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to try it because I'm doing this interview. I want to see what happens. Dude, I was falling asleep at the end of the 10 minutes and I was like bummed. I had to get up and put my headphones away. I was like, oh man, I want to do this and just like be ready to actually fall asleep, which I was. And I still had to get up and turn the lights off and stuff. So I was like, you guys cracked a code. So congrats on that. Questions would be around what I'm experiencing in the app is where does the music come from? And how did you guys figure out how to do the sequencing of breath? Something I found unique about it, in contrast to past breath work that I've done, is there's a lot of variation. There's like, there's the inhale 12 and then exhale 15, and then it jumps to like 2 seconds in, 2 seconds out. And there's all these kind of different changes that seem to be ubiquitous throughout the few journeys that I've tried. So who's doing the music? How'd you guys come up with like how to do the breath work? And after you answer that, let's get into some of the science for the science minded people that are finding the rest of this way too woo woo.
Yeah, let's do it. So I think a mixture of just being like hardcore power users of breath work. And so we had first tried Wim Hof, and that was, the up regulated style cyclical breathing. You're like, wow, this is like, holy shit, it's 15 minutes. Like, you can feel this. This is changing your state. Wow. And so then we kind of started, read James Nestor's book, Breath. And
I'm the
then
only idiot that hasn't read that book yet. Everyone just like read it except me. I need to get on that. Thank you.
so it's great. It just kind of explains like the science behind why breath is important, why it's the fourth pillar of health, which we'll get into. But so the intellectual piece was like, wow, this is supremely good for you. And you can actually change your state. You can really shift up or down. And you're moving between states of the nervous system, the sympathetic versus parasympathetic. So we kind of learned about that. And through that, tried every style of breath work, Kapalabhati, box breathing, 4-7-8 breathing, all these different patterns, and realized from reading tons of research papers that, inhaling is increasing your heart rate. You're blowing off a lot of carbon dioxide. You are constricting your blood vessels. You're creating a fight or flight state. Long, slow exhales deep into the bottom of the lungs, creating parasympathetic rest and digest state. So everything came from, okay, you can like go into fight or flight, you can go into rest and digest. So when we create a session, it's like, well, what are we trying to do here? If we're trying to sleep, long, slow exhales, a lot of breath retentions, slower and less inhale. So maybe you inhale for 3, exhale for 8. And so very basic
I'm
principles.
doing those right now, by the way.
Yeah, it's beautiful. So that was like, okay, well, if we're going to do a sleep or some type of down-regulated emotion, great. Then on top of that, we started layering in, asking customers, hey, what do you want? Some people would say, oh, we want the deep psychedelic ones. Okay, great. We know that that's going to be, 40 minutes to an hour to kind of create a turnoff of the default mode network, the part of the mind that's, always on with judgment. Like you're actually physically turning that off by slowing the oxygen absorption into the brain. You're sending signals to the limbic system. You're reducing your sense of self, your sense of memory. So you're creating not quite psychedelic, but similar state. And in that state, you're processing emotion. So it's like, okay, well, what emotions could we process? Anger, grief, shame. So we'll listen to our customers. Someone will say, oh, I'm really struggling with anger. I just got out of a breakup. So we have on cutting the cord for breakup. So the goal was to combine breathwork patterns, which we knew through the science, with incredible music. So the music, we partner with DJs or use royalty-free libraries. And Harry's a producer. He's like, magical being that does all these things. But so he'll sit there, and once we've decided on the breath pattern, the emotion, we'll then talk to therapists about like, what is the language here? So is it, there's one with an amazing like inner child release. There's another about forgiveness. And we use technical exercises that therapists will use. And so it's a combination of the breathing patterns, the visualizations, and the language and the music. And the goal was like, let's not make it like a meditation. Let's make it like your favorite song on Spotify, where it's like, you're doing third eye. It's kind of like you're listening to a dope set. There's another one on there called Roller Coaster, and the DJ is this person, Flying Colors, who's a Burning Man DJ. And he made that custom set. And in that one, instead of the standard breathing patterns, we were like, let's design the breath to the music. So sometimes it'll be in 12, out 6, because the music demands it. And so it makes it more like every session is a work of art. So it makes it entertaining. Like, yeah, I'm fucking listening to this wicked set. I'm breathing to it. I'm creating a state change. Oh shit, that's what happens when I go to a nightclub. So it was really thinking through a combination of science, music, visualizations, and language to be able to help you shift your state 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes, whatever you need.
That's really interesting about the language of working with therapists, because I have also noticed, and I don't know, maybe it's just my judgmental, critical mind, but when it comes to music, I'm super critical, like very picky music person. Of course, I think the stuff I like is the best. Probably isn't to you or anyone else, but to me it is. So the music's really good, but also I think a couple days ago I did the affirmations one.
Mm-hmm.
And I put it on. I was like, affirmations, like basic, I'm like, what am I going to learn from this kind of, not going into it with a negative mindset, but not really high expectations. I was like, yeah, affirmations, I get it. But I think because I was in such a deep state from the breath, and I was also, I think pretty much every time I've done it, well, almost every time has been under the Lucille light, which is a show I've done in the past. We'll put the Lucille Light episode in the show notes again at, what was it? lukestory.com/Robbie. but I'm in this really transcendent experience, and then those affirmations were actually very meaningful and things that I would work with outside of an app. I mean, this is like language that I understand and use, and I didn't find it to be corny at all. You know what I mean? Like sometimes, I don't know, you're in a yoga class, right? You travel to a small town, it's like, some mom that went to yoga teacher training 2 weeks ago and is guiding you through something. You're kinda like, "Ah, this is kinda campy or corny or not that deep," or just, you don't relate for whatever reason. And I was pleasantly surprised that that element, like the actual words chosen, the, um, the dictates of, say this inside and stuff are actually very deep and profound, including the one that I did last night. Allison's had this cedar fever thing that we heard about in Texas and have yet to experience, but unfortunately, she's had this thing going on for the past week. So doing breath work has not been on the top of her agenda. But I coerced her into doing it last night in anticipation for our interview. So we did the 30-minute. What was it? I took a note of it. Oh, the couple's energy, right? 30-minute thing, and she obliged. And the prompts in it were so beautiful that at the end of it, dude, I mean, I'm generally more emotional than she is. I was like bawling, dude. We're laying together holding hands. "Oh, I love you so much." But a lot of it was from the breath, but equally so from the prompts. I mean, these are things that I want to think about, moments um, uh, in which I experienced kindness or love from her, and like thinking about those and actually having the practice to go, wow, this person really does love me. And here are all the instances that I have in my memory bank that I can pull up and actually re-feel those. It was really beautiful. However, during the experience last night, our little dog Cookie there, that I think is probably out of the camera's reach, was laying right there under the table. And right when we started doing the deep breathing, the inhales, she ripped the gnarliest silent but violent fart. And I mean, it was actually hilarious because we both at the same moment were like, fucking Cookie, And I realized maybe sometimes, the dog should have her own space in intimate moments like that. But yeah, it was hilarious. So in 30 minutes, we had like laughter, tears, depth, deep intimacy with the eye gazing portion. That was another part of the prompts that were really beautiful. It's like we do that, but we're not necessarily going to just do that on a Tuesday night unless I'm like, hey, in a half an hour, can I borrow you? Let's have a little 30-minute experience. So I like the intentionality of that, especially doing it with a partner. That was really cool. So those are some of my, my personal anecdotal experiences thus far. I'm a huge fan. I'm super into it. Not just saying that because you're here, but it's very cool. So those are a couple of my experiences. Aside from your own journey that you've expressed here today, what sort of transformations have you seen with other people, in your space in Toronto, or reflections from people using the app? Like, what kind of crazy stuff are you seeing from people in terms of emotional breakthroughs and things of that nature?
It is insane. Like, I never would have expected this in my wildest dreams. It's at a point now where I'm getting 2, 3 messages a day, or our team is. The reviews, even if you look at the physical space in Toronto and go through the reviews, it's just every single one, the crazy people are saying like, "Hey, I haven't cried in 10 years. This was the first time I felt safe enough to like release emotions." We had one that stuck with me from COVID, was a woman who's so scared and isolated, she would not even go to the door to get her Uber Eats, would wait 10 minutes until the person had left. And she said doing these deeper sessions every week for 12 weeks, she was able to overcome her fear and start to go back out into
Using the app at
society
home?
using the app. Things for like, chronic fatigue syndrome, people being completely healed. Like we launched in January. We're like, you know what? It's really hard to do a cold plunge. It's not for the mainstream. It's like fantastic, but it's hard. So let's just make it fucking easy. And the other thing, it's not that fun. Like you're in there for 3 minutes, you're kind of sitting there, waiting, mastering your breath. You feel great after, but why is it not guided? And so we spent some time, designed 31 sessions with breathwork in the cold. You listen to amazing music, and we just made it free. We just said, you know what, we're just gonna make this free for anyone who ever wants a free month of the app. It's called the Play It Cool Challenge. It launches. no money on marketing. We just kind of launch it. We're like, hey, this is a free thing. You want to learn to cold plunge? Here it is. So many people sign up for it on New Year. And we launched it like 2 days before New Year's, no planning. Breaks our website. Like hundreds of people join this WhatsApp chat from all over the world. So I'm looking at like, who are these people? Like Italy, Kenya, Dubai, like, all over Canada, the US. And I'm like, it's so cool because people are just, plungers are nuts. They love it so much. They're so passionate, but they're doing it alone in their little ice hole. And there's not really a community of plungers that's global. And so we just kind of put this thing out there for free. And every day people are sharing like, this is the first time I've been able to keep a New Year's habit for 12 days. I never thought I could do this. My resilience, my bravery. It's the first time I felt safe feeling emotions. I'm always in my head. So, like it just makes me feel so good, man. Like really to see something like that, put it out and have people like what you build and say like, thanks, like you're making a difference. So I think it's changing lives. Like to see a lawyer come out on a Monday night, do a loving kindness class, talk about the enemy he felt in his dad, start crying in front of a group of like 40 strangers. Like where the hell does that happen?
That's so cool. God, what a cool job you have. I mean, I do too. I'm very grateful to share people like you with the world. There's going to be people listening to this that are, some will be very experienced in these realms, and some have never heard of any of this, and they're going to, oh, by the way, that's a good opportunity. You guys gave a great offer here, and I'm going to throw that in. I'll probably have put it in the intro, but just before I forget, if you guys go to othership.com/Luke, you can use the app for 14 days for free. Thank you for that. I have a sense. How much is the app, by the way? Because you guys gave it to me for free, but for a normal person that doesn't have a podcast, how much is it?
Yeah, it's $128 for the year.
Wow, not bad. I think, is that less than Netflix or on par?
Yeah, it's about the same.
Okay. I'd say if you can't, well, get your 14 days for free at othership.com/Luke. I bet if I don't have the discipline to do this, but I think if one were to cancel Netflix and just do this, their life would probably be a lot better. But maybe some people can afford both.
Yeah, we look at it like one, if accessibility is an issue, DM us and we can figure something out. So we never want someone who, is like, hey, I want to use these practices. It's kind of, we followed Sam Harris. I always really respected how he did that. So DM us, with an ask and happy to figure something out.
Cool.
But two, the goal was, look, if you're doing one session a month, one of these deep dives, and it changes your emotional state, like what is that worth? $128 is half of a therapy session. So if you're using this even just once a month, like one of those couples energy date sessions once per month, we thought like the value was there. So the goal was like to make sure the experience is, yeah, there's the daytime 5-minute state shifts, the getting to bed, which are great. But if you can do one of these deep emotional ones every once in a while, we thought like that would convey value to the user.
Absolutely. I've been doing one every day, but I also, worked for 52 years to create a life that gives me an hour in the morning where I can really get myself in the state that is necessary to do all the things that I want to do. Not everyone's in that position, but that's another thing that I think is cool about it. Yeah, if your life at the moment doesn't account for an hour in the morning to like be your best self, do 10 minutes. Whether you're using like your app or any kind of breathwork practice, Wim Hof, whatever it is, because now we know the science on this is universal to human beings, the way that we breathe, you're going to have an impact on your life that's positive, just period. There's no way to do this, no matter how you do it, without having something good happen, So I want to encourage anyone, especially people like me that have a difficult time finding the discipline to really go deep on their own. I have the discipline to do some breath work pretty much every day for a long time now, but I'm not going to do an hour on my own. It's not going to happen. I might set that intention, but no.
Yeah, the times I do the hour is with friends. And so what it's become is, 10 friends come over and we're partying. And that's the way we party is we put it on speakers blasting across the house. We lay down, do 1 hour of breath work, and that replaces the bottle of wine or the drugs. And it's kind of like an exciting thing to do in a group.
That's actually a really good point because we've just been busy kind of moving into our house, so we haven't invited many people over and are just kind of being hermits for whatever reason. It's what feels good. But I had the thought once we got a little more settled, I thought, man, we should hire I have a lot of friends here that are breathwork practitioners. We could, beg one of them to come do it or pay them to do it or something and, set up the living room down there and have like a breathwork night. And I'm like, sounds hard to put it together. But I just dude, I could put your app on and crank
Yeah.
it on the whole house system and just blast it and invite some homies over to the loft. And you don't need a facilitator because you guys are doing that for us. That's a great idea. I like it. All right. So, last thing I want to cover here is what's your absolute stretch vision for what you're doing with Othership? Like, give me, in 10 years from now, what does this look like for you if everything goes according to your plan?
Yes, I think the two big problems we want to solve is I'm standard person. I don't know anything about this. So I'm not into spirituality. I don't do yoga. I don't do meditation. I'm unhappy. I don't really know why. I don't know what tools I have. And this is, 95% of North Americans. Like I'm struggling. Okay. And I know there's these amazing tools like psychedelics and meditation, but the prep of the friction to get to them is just too hard. The other side of that problem is, hey, I've done these crazy peak experience retreats, but I'm not integrating them into my life. So yeah, I've went to the meditation retreat, but the change didn't happen. So I want to solve that problem to help the average person who's unhappy and overwhelmed come into a more happy place where they understand, process their emotions and do it in a way that's accessible. So what does that entail? It entails, in 10 years, an Othership in every major city. And that Othership, that bathhouse is like the atomic unit, the hub, where you go weekly, you meet your friends, you hang out there. It can be socially, you do your emotional classes that we talked about. Then you have the app that you use at home. So you can use that daily, for 5 minutes, just to improve your breathing patterns, improve your emotional awareness and regulation. And then there's a bit of a deeper process. So there's two things I really want to build in the future. One is a kind of like a pilgrimage. So when you have 50 studios and a million customers, once a year you have a 5-day kind of a music festival meets Tony Robbins. And so, it's you go and you meet all the other hardcores that are using the product and you have this thing that's kind of, it's super fun, but there's some work. And so at night it's a party, but in the day it's personal development. It kind of gives you that thing to look forward to. And then I would love to introduce groups. So something we're thinking about is you've come to the space 10 times. One of the biggest problems outside of this prep and integration is loneliness. So I don't know if you heard the stat, but what do you think the average close friends, the number of close friends that the average North American has?
3.
0.8. So most people out there don't even have a single person to
Man.
share their problems with. And we
Oh
feel more
my
isolated
God.
than ever. And it's become everything you can do can be done from your phone. You don't need to be in community the same way you used to. Jobs are changing, everything's remote. So, it'd be really nice. There's people that come that are lonely. They're looking for a friend group. So you start coming to the space, you've come 10 times, you get a message, say, hey, do you want to join a group? And that group includes once a week, like a Zoom check-in with your group, once a week an Othership session, and then a retreat. And so this solves all the problems. It gives you the group, gives you the sustainability, the accountability, and then also allows you to do those peak experiences, reduces the friction. And I think if you have something like that, some kind of system, kind of like the way AA is like a really beautiful system that works. If you have some kind of system like this, it can appeal to a different set of people. And so in 10 years, if we built all of that, I think we can help millions of mainstream people change their lives. So that's kind of the
I
goal
love
is to
it.
build that
I
system.
love it. What about the integration of plant medicine, psychedelics, as I think we were talking earlier about ketamine being illegal. I wouldn't say it's a psychedelic, but definitely can help you see some things you don't see normally. Where do you see the integration of working with entheogenic substances, et cetera, as legality permits?
Yeah, so I think from my standpoint is what we can provide to that service is the prep. So for many people, like what I've seen here is you come into the space, you're kind of like, oh, sauna ice baths, cool, I'm feeling good. Like I've started using the app, I'm doing breathwork, I'm feeling good. You hear in the space, ayahuasca, psilocybin. You start following the podcast to be healthier. I listened to Luke's story and I heard about it and you're interested. And so we can help take a group of those interested people and then make a recommendation on a safe retreat to go to. Not run the retreat, but partner. It could be partnered with Holos in Costa Rica, which I just got back from, which was
Did you go there?
yeah, it was incredible.
Oh man, I'm supposed to go there, and I haven't yet, sadly.
One of the best experiences of my. So I've done 4 deep dive ayahuasca retreats, and that one I went with. It was to call in fatherhood. So I went with 15 of my ayahuasca for me has always been super hard, dramatic, deep, dark, letting go of traumas. And this one I went with 15 friends, my sister, my family, like all
Wow.
the best people in my life were going to be around my son with the idea of, hey, I'm transitioning into a new form of life. I want to like call it in. And instead of like shriveling in the corner, scared and struggling, I asked for help, and my friends would come over and hug me during the ceremony, and it was just, yeah, the nature was incredible.
Wow.
So something partnering someone like that who's an expert, that's not our expertise, and sending a group of people in the same city to go, and then when they come back, also providing the container so they continue. So one thing that was cool about that ayahuasca doing with my friends, the other ones I've been to, you really get close in these 7-day, 10-day retreats, and you're like, wow, we're gonna be friends forever, and then the WhatsApp chat for 1 month is pretty poppin'. Then, like, 3
That's
months
how
later, then 1 year later, like, I don't even remember the names of the people I did the first ayahuasca with, and so wouldn't it be great if you did it with people from your town and then had a space to go to that was geared for transformation? So I don't see us providing psychedelics, but I see us working with providers to provide everything around it to make the change stick.
That's awesome. I mean, I can't think of a better integration than community, hot, cold, breath. I mean, that's it. That's the winning formula. Wow, very cool, man. Well, I wish you the best in your endeavors. Very happy to support what you guys are doing, especially the move to Austin. That one, selfishly, I'm most excited about. Until then, I'll use the app, and God forbid I ever have to go to New York City. But if I do, an Othership there will make it a lot better. God bless everyone that still likes New York. I just don't like cities in general, Austin included. So I don't live down there where all the people and 5G towers are. Do you? One last thing I want to ask you, actually. Uh, do you have any apprehension about building brick and mortar businesses in light of what we just went through with all these draconian lockdowns and stuff, which from my purview seem to be much more extreme north of the border in Canada? I mean, I'm sure you guys have talked about that. I mean, what happens if they're like, oh, hey, there's a new thing and we're shutting everything down?
Yeah, we're bankrupt. So yeah, like, the COVID, the first vaccine came out and we were like, looks like this is going to end. You can kind of get the sense, we look to the UK and we are like, let's roll the dice. People need this. They want it. Fuck it. Like, let's go. It's important. And so we signed the lease, put our own money into it, took the plunge, like literally, and opened. And, now it's just like, fuck that. We made something that's fucking awesome. We want to give it to people and we're going. And yeah, like if another pandemic hits, we're bankrupt, and that's just
Is what it is.
the fact. But like, people need in-person experiences. Nobody wants to
Man.
be digital everything. It sucks. Like,
Well,
it's
just think of and I don't want to go down this rabbit hole because we're out of time and we got lives to live and everything. But one of the saddest things about this whole era for me has just been how many people have been forced into isolation and how much suffering that's caused, and people how much more people are prone to illness of all types, viral in nature or not, when they're not moving their body and breathing and getting hot and cold and eating healthy food and having community. I mean, it's like if you wanted to make a populace really sick, the very best way to do it would be stop them from going to gyms and, like church and all
even
these
just
things.
being alone. The study just came
Oh
out.
my God.
Loneliness has the same impact on inflammation in the body as smoking 15 cigarettes a day.
Really? That's
So
a real
real
thing?
stat came out,
Wow.
Cigna health study a couple years ago. Yeah, like that's insane. Like the fact, and it doesn't mean that you're around people, it's that you feel a lack of meaning and connection in your life.
Yeah.
And so for COVID, you put people alone. That's a form of torture. And
Oh
so,
man.
yeah, for me, like let's open. And I don't know. Yeah, this is probably a longer topic or the last question, but I don't think people are going to accept something like this again. It's different. It's like, hey, we did this before. It didn't work. Now you're facing
That's a good point.
all
Yeah.
these, people just don't want that. So
Yeah.
we're taking the risk and
Good for you, man. Good for you. I encourage all entrepreneurs in the wellness space to follow suit. I mean, I luckily had a podcast, and people that I interview aren't generally afraid to breathe each other's air, even in the middle of whatever that was. But I stopped doing public speaking, and if that had been like my main source of revenue and all that, it would have been devastating. Thankfully, I was kind of relieved actually. Now that you can go do that again and events are happening, I actually don't really feel like doing it. I kind of got used to not going out and traveling and doing talks and stuff. I enjoy it, but like the time to get there and all the stuff that goes into it's kind of pain in the ass. But man, I felt for people that make a living doing live events and stuff. It's just brutal, especially those people that are doing things like you are that are really supportive to people's emotional and mental and physical well-being. It's like, man, if we're going to shut anything down, how about not that? You know what I mean? Shut down bars. I don't, maybe not that either because that's medicine for some folks too. But anyway, congratulations on your success. I wish you much more of it, and I can't wait for hopefully thousands of people listening to this podcast over the next few weeks to check out your app, and if they're in Toronto or in the future, New York City, to come see what you guys are up to, man. It's really, really cool.
Thanks, Luke. I appreciate it. Just inviting me to your house, putting something together to make me feel less nervous before we start. I thought it was really thoughtful. It was beautiful to meet you in person. So I really appreciate it.
Likewise. And I think I'm gonna adopt that. Put people on a little 10-minute journey before we sit down. Anyone that's willing, at least, which hopefully most of them will be. Yeah, you were my beta test. And you were, by the way, very coherent and present. You didn't seem too spaced out or anything. So apparently it works.
Awesome. Thank you.